Hello everybody, and how are we doing? I just wanted to make a quick video today because, well, we survived Three-Eye Atlas's close approach the other day, and I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about the whole, Oumuamua, Three-Eye Atlas, Borisov, all that, and what it might be, what it probably is, and what it might, what it means, at least to me. So, about what, in 2017, Oumuamua came in to our solar system, and before we could figure out what it was and what it was doing, it exited our solar system. And Oumuamua means scout. I believe it's in Hawaiian. Means scout. So, were we scouted? You know, there's always those conspiracies of they're always telling us what they're up to. They're always telling us. No, they're always telling us because of some weird, thing they have to do where they gotta warn us all about everything. It makes kind of sense that after a scout, a more, in-depth force would come through. No, I've been kind of following this Three-Eye Atlas thing, with skepticism, because, there are some people that, oh, it's an alien spaceship, it's a this, it's a that. I try not to put too much stock in that stuff because, for one, it doesn't matter. If it's an alien spaceship, then we're screwed, and there's nothing you can really do about it. The quicker you realize that, probably the better off you'll be. Number two, kind of goes back to number one. Like, what's it matter? If an advanced alien race is scoping us out, I guess it boils down to, like, what kind of a race. You gotta, if I'm gonna use a Star Trek reference here, I guess what I'm saying is, you would rather be scoped out by the Federation than by the Romulans, okay? The Federation is a big, basically scientifically based organization. Yes, they can fight too, just because you need to fight. Sometimes, it would be ignorant to believe that everything out there is nice and peaceful. So, going on that kind of philosophy, you would much rather be checked out by the Federation than by the Romulans, because the Romulans are going to go, we should set up some kind of, plasma siphoning operation in this solar system and suck up all the plasma from the sun. And who gives a fuck about the pre-warp civilization that resides here, They don't give a damn. So, that being said, I think if they were aliens, I think we would know, because they wouldn't hide behind an asteroid or looking like a comet, They would just show up, knowing that there's nothing we can do about it, and they could just do their thing and leave, and, consequences be damned, because there wouldn't be any consequences, not for them at least. Consequences would be for us when our sun didn't have the output it normally does, That would be the consequence. So, I think on that logical basis, I think that it's not aliens, or at least it's not malevolent aliens. If you go back and you watch Star Trek Insurrection, it's one of the worst ones, but they have an interesting, spoilers ahead, they have an interesting part in the movie where Data goes haywire, but they're in a like a duck blind, is what they call it, and it's like a holographically shielded observation platform where they can oversee this seemingly primitive race. The race didn't end up being primitive, but that's beside the point. So yeah, I don't think that we are in any kind of danger. I think that whatever it is, even if it is aliens, are gonna be fine. That's what I think. I mean, what I think is irrelevant, and if it is bad aliens and they come over to kill us all, then I guess I'll say I was wrong, but I don't think that's the case. I think if anything, they're good aliens, if they're even aliens at all. Otherwise, I think it's probably just what it is, a rock. You know, we don't know everything. We like to think we know everything, but we don't. And let's get real. Our idea of chemistry and physics and a lot of that comes from our experience, and our experience comes from our little corner of the universe here in our solar system, and what we can tell from far off, you know, by doing scans, and they can tell planetary masses by the kind of stuff going on in the atmosphere, and for the most part, physics are open-ended. They can be revised based on new findings. So who knows, man? A lot of scientists like to think, well, if aliens were coming here, it would take zillions of years, and it's just, we don't know that. We don't know. For all we know, there's an advanced race of aliens out there that are only 100 years more advanced than us. Because, think about it. If human technology, if we took the technology we have today and brought it back 100 years ago, it would seem alien, The computers, the camera I'm taking this on, everything would seem very alien to the people of that time, So that being said, I think it's easy to get confused by stuff, We don't know nothing. And, could very well be aliens from the Galactic Federation that people always talk about. I don't know. I think no matter what, there's nothing we can do about it, so we might as well just hang on and see what happens. That's what I think. That would be cool if it was aliens. It would be cool. Knowing human beings, we'd just start hating them. We'd maybe unite together, but we'd still end up hating the aliens. That's just human nature, I think, is just to hate something. When we run out of hating each other, people to hate in humanity, There was an interesting Star Trek episode about that in Star Trek Enterprise. They had the Terra Prime, Terra for Earth, and they were a xenophobic, somewhat sympathetic terrorist organization. They didn't want to hurt anybody. They just wanted all the aliens out of the human world. Because at that time in the show, it wasn't the United Federation of Planets didn't exist yet. That's why I think Enterprise got kind of a raw deal. It would have been cool to see the formation of the Federation and the Earth-Romulan War and all that. But yeah, they just wanted Earth to be for the Earthlings, and they didn't really care about aliens when it came to trade and this and that. They just wanted all the aliens off the world, off of Earth. So, and I think that's probably more realistic to like how humanity will be. It'll probably be more like the Mirror, the Mirror episodes, where humans are all horrible fascists and stuff. I don't think it'll be that bad, but I think it's probably more likely. And I don't see anything wrong with that. In the Star Trek world, the Cardassians have their world, the Romulans have theirs, and every other race has their own thing. But the humans are like part of a weird, galactic thing. And it's just because Star Trek was based after the liberal world order, It's that simple. So yeah, if anything, I think that's all it was. I think that the last several, I think Oumuamua came in first. They would have seen us from long range probes and stuff, and long range, telescopes and sensors and stuff. And they said, oh, well, there's a developing, technologically developing race over there. Let's send a probe, make it look like a rock so they don't get suspicious. So they sent Oumuamua, and it came busting through. And if you look at the plane of the solar system, is like, imagine a disk. So if this is a disk like that, and then turn it over on its side, so all the planets are on this plane. and it came flying through like that, and then came out that side. So it kind of came from underneath us, and then busted out the side. And by the time we knew what it was already leaving. So it's a a fast probe to come in here and see what's going on, and then to get out of here before we could even react to it, really. And that's a good idea. You'd want to, they know that we're primitive, but we're not so primitive that we couldn't see something. We have the Parker observation probe. We have several other celestial probes in and around the sun and all over the solar system, really. I mean, there were several different probes from several different agencies that kind of followed this thing around. The Juno probe in orbit of Jupiter, the landers on Mars, several other probes that were publicly told us about. But there's probably assets out there that they haven't told us about that we're kind of tracking this thing. So that's interesting. So these aliens would know, okay, well, they're primitives, but they're not so freaking primitive that they wouldn't be able to see us coming, So they disguise themselves as a rock, come flying through, and then even if we do see it, it's like, well, it's a rock. Yeah, it's unusual, but it's just a rock. So they just let it, they think, well, the people are, this thing is just gonna go through the solar system. We'll get a look at these people. And if it warrants further attention, then we'll bring further attention. Well, it must have warranted further attention, because then they sent Borisov. Looks a little more like a rock. Came through again, quick, before we could really do much about it and study it. And that's what it did. Now, with all this extra attention, they sent 3i Atlas. Now, the point behind 3i Atlas is, instead of jetting through really quick, it's going to do a flyby, kind of like our grand tour. When Voyager did a grand tour of the solar system, the math behind it was that we launched a probe like this, and using gravitational assist, we can hit Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and exit the solar system. So they use these gravities of these different planets to help push. And that's pretty much what 3i Atlas did. Came in at such an angle and such a rate of speed, which is, again, extremely unusual, because it was going faster than anything else, unaffected by the gravitational forces of the larger celestial bodies in our solar system. It came flying through and was able to hit up all these key planets without hitting up Earth. It got closest to Earth, but it was still very far away. But it hit up all these other planets in our solar system, and there was times where it looked like it was actually releasing kind of like small probes or something, which is very exciting, because who knows what that could be, Kind of creepy, if you ask me, because who knows, like I said. So that would be something we would do, if we saw a something of interest, say we're in space and we see something of interest, just like they do in the Star Trek universe. They see it because of scans and probes and yada yada. They send, small, inconspicuous probes, and then they'll send a ship through there, a ship that'll lay low and kind of steer clear of any way that the inhabitants can see them, hide behind the sun or something, and then eventually they'll get to going down there and I'm not going to say infiltrating, but spying on the people, just like the Men in Black, I guess, people that don't look exactly right. And that's the kind of stuff that they would do. So if you ask me, 3i Atlas, it's on its third leg, the third step of a five-step thing, where you find the civilization, then you go and send an actual probe to make sure they're there and everything. Then you send a third one there to release probes that are going to stay behind indefinitely. And then you put up a base or something somewhere in the solar system for a long-term observation of said race, and then you make contact. Now, based on that, I would say that we are on that third leg, because they did see that 3i Atlas things were coming off of it. Different light sources and whatnot were coming off of it. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean that it left probes behind? Kind of seems like it if you ask me. So, but that's what I think. I think we're on that third leg of some kind of contact. Why would they want to contact us? Who knows? I don't know. It's human nature to think we're so awesome and special. But if aliens were that advanced that they could do this kind of interstellar travel, then we would be irrelevant. It would be like what we would do if we found a primitive civilization in the Amazon jungle or something, or those people on North Sentinel Island. We're curious. We want to study them, but at the same time, they're a curiosity. Human beings study anthropology to glean how we got to where we are today. And, I think that's what aliens would be doing, with primitive humans. They'd want to see, maybe we were like that at one point in time, stuck on our planet and in our solar system, fighting amongst ourselves. Who knows, I would think so. I would think that we would do that. Normal humans, like not Star Trek humans, but like us. I would assume that hundreds or thousands of years from now, if we're out exploring the galaxy and we come across other, primitive aliens, that we would study them. Just for all sorts of, why not? We study everything else. But we study that stuff in anthropology to get a glimpse of like how we might have been, in our very primitive state. So I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to think that advanced aliens, benevolent aliens would do the same. Now, are all aliens going to be benevolent? Probably not. There's probably going to be some mean ones out there. It all depends on what you consider to be mean. Some people would say abducting a chimpanzee from its home in Africa and bringing it to America